Hey guys, I've got no one on yet, I don't think. Oh, hello. Thank you. Hello. It's nice to see you guys. Thank you for coming on. Hey Dina. Hey Cassie. Mwah, mwah. Ah, hello. I just thought I'd do I don't know, I just got this really strong feeling. I've just been doing a lot of research, so I just thought I'd put a little bit of a live video on and start talking a bit more about the stuff that I'm seeing, the stuff that's quite concerning. But at the same time, the stuff that's bringing a lot of people together, even though it's bringing a lot of people apart too. So, yay. I think the biggest concern that I have at the moment is obviously for the people in Victoria, and like obviously you guys. Hey, oh look at, oh thank you. Yes, I know it's grown. It's really nice. Took a long time. It felt like a long time. Thanks, beautiful. Yeah, and the concern I have is that Australia, at this point of time, what I'm seeing based on law and based on all these different facets that I've been sort of tuning in with, is that there's infiltration from the highest level of our so-called government at this point of time, and that is it's just really crazy to watch how much divisive tactics are being applied to the people. And I guess my concern is that a lot of the information that I'm coming across, or that people are talking to me about, is that it's a psyop and it's heading from Victoria and heading north. And so it's not the normal, what we've been told it to be. Maybe it's just a lot different behind the scenes, or maybe it's this. Maybe they're both, what we've been told and what is also happening. I'm not gonna negate, because I'm not in the actual government doing it myself, but from the information that I understand, it is a very it's very much coming from a very clear mind focused agenda. And I'm seeing a lot of maliciousness and there's so much mind control present in a lot of our global culture, and it's coming up really obvious because we're seeing so much of a divide in people. And what the biggest thing that I'm noticing is that people are being weaponized. So if you've got wounding and you have like a trauma, which is why so many people are really, really being pushed to deal with their childhood trauma or their teenage trauma or any kind of experience or residual wounding that needs to be resolved on a narrative level, so you can make much clearer decisions. Because when you've got trauma, you can't actually see 360. You think you can, and you think you're operating at full capacity, but what you're often operating at is very fragmented awareness. So when we start to heal our wounding, and we start to sort of come into that place where we identify and where we can recognize that we're allowed to be human. We're all wounded in some way, shape, or form from the human point of view. We have aspects of our consciousness that are so divine that they don't even have a concept of wounding because they're so perfect and whole. But we exist within a vessel which holds our consciousness from a physical standpoint, and that physical standpoint has limitations because it's micro to macro, macro to micro, and there's different, I guess, rules in which govern a lot of this stuff. But the more that we can understand our own wounding, the more that we can go into it, and it's really hard work. Like I'm not saying it's an easy process if you are actually going through it. But it is actually you'll see the difference over time, and you'll start to see that you have much bigger, expansive awareness to make choices with from that healing. So every time I went through a healing process, or as I was continuously, clearing a lot of traumas and things, that programs and belief systems and really confused ideas of reality that had, I'd grown up with thinking are normal without even questioning them, because they just become a part of your framework. So it's like what I said, you think you're thinking from full capacity, but you're really thinking from a very limited point of view, and therefore you can't identify so much of your own consciousness. Hey, hello. Hey, Maeve. Lovely to see you, gorgeous. So that wounding needs to be healed so we aren't used against our own people. That happens when, say, for example, we have wounding that has interfered with many layers of our being, and that wounding causes a resistance to the Christ consciousness or the Christ awareness within your own self. Oh, hey, Gemma. Hello, gorgeous. So good to see you. And that wounding is like, it becomes like a stagnant, but like a very dark portal, or I can sometimes feel it like it comes through the body. And sometimes where people have, like, say, physical manifestation, say it's become so crystallized, that trauma, into the physical body, that it's manifested a sort of a creation from that wounding, which is often dysfunctional or distorted, but it's there to give you a message in the physical, because you won't, so many layers of trauma, you can't always identify what often people that have trauma have disassociation, and they can't feel their body. So sometimes you can't even tell that you have trauma in the physical sense. It doesn't become a real thing until you actually manifest an illness process, kind of like what I did, and then you see it as an actual physical thing, and then you've got to deal with the physical level of it, because then it's already manifested by that point. And then there's laws of karma, cycles that work within the physical reality. So once you've manifested something in the physical reality, it's then in the cycles of the physical kind of experience of what karma can be within our own sort of experience in human. So getting back to the body, is that when we have woundings and we have stagnant or dark spaces, what happens is entities and energies that are parasitical consciousness, and often when I say parasitical consciousness, I'm sort of referring to psychopathic, narcissistic, sociopathic consciousness, which it has become so reversed polarized in its own energy, and it doesn't know how to self-heal, and it doesn't know how to have the alchemy of self-healing from the wholeness of who they are. They've become so focused outwardly that they continuously need to seek their fix and their medicine, what they perceive as their medicine, as an outward thing. But the problem is that puts limitations and it puts strain on other beings, because it's a parasitical consciousness. So they're feeding off the life force. And I'm not saying that actually literally takes that person's life force. That person on some subconscious level, I do believe in people being victims in that they get manipulated into situations, so I'm not at all denying that, but they tend to not necessarily, they sort of agree to the terms without realizing. So they either have wounding themselves that caters and co-creates with that narcissist. So say, for example, you're thinking things in polarity, you're thinking empath on one spectrum, who's someone who's overly feeling based but doesn't have the mental mastery to be able to navigate the empath as the empath. And then you've got the narcissist, who is mentally masterful, because everything is about manipulation but nothing's about feeling or empathy. So you've got these two spectrums. And I understand narcissism a lot. I've experienced that as a big growth process in my lifetime, so that's been a big part of why I can see the world the way I'm seeing it, and how I can understand that when someone has severe wounding, they can actually be utilized and weaponized. So we can see in our reality consciously, what we're seeing is sometimes really vicious nastiness coming through, and it's actually it's very divisive, destructive, deflective. It's very, 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 like it's a very, very dark energy that I'm seeing in some people, in even on Facebook, and just certain strands. When some energy gets unleashed, it just goes, it like kind of spirals out of control. It's a real chaos energy, and I kind of keep seeing that sometimes there's, through people's wounding, they're being utilized through that chaos energy, and they end up getting caught up in it. They don't have the ability or the mastery to stay centered within their own consciousness, to be able to anchor themselves within, being influenced by this dark energy. And that is the difference between someone who has done a lot of self-work and done a lot of shadow self-work, or deep inner work, or unconscious ignorance aspects of ourselves work, compared to someone who hasn't. And when someone's done a lot of work within their own ignorance, because we've all got ignorant spaces, it's spaces where we aren't aware of, or that we're not connected to, or we don't know how to, access, or we just don't have the information or don't have the awareness. Okay, let there be light. That was the first thing that God apparently said when everything was created. It started off with let there be light. So with that light and that ability to kind of bring that through, it helps transmute a lot of the darkness. You're bringing a torch into your own ignorance, and you're looking around, and then you learn how to bring, bigger lights, and you start to learn how to create orbs, and you can start lighting up the space and seeing what shit you need to deal with, and what is actually the cause or the source point of why there are certain programs playing out, or people that are co-creating with you in, say, for example, polarity, like I mentioned before, empathy versus narcissism. And it's not like I don't have a negative experience, like narcissism is narcissism. It's parasitical consciousness. It feeds off things externally because it doesn't remember its own light internally. Eventually, when they get to such a point where they become so outward and they don't even know they have an inward self, they lose, they only can live in the reality based on the outer identity, which is the solar identity or our ego. So they only can survive through the ego because they've diminished or have zero connection or bridge between their inner world and their outer world. So that's a big thing. And I think that's something that I really wanted to share with a lot of people, is like, it's really important to do a lot of self-work right now. It's really important to go into a lot of your child wounding or programming. I'm sure most of you guys are, because that's like most of the people that I know are people that are genuinely doing that anyway. That's just the reality that we share. But I'm reiterating it because it actually can interfere with how you respond on the daily basis. And this is in preparation. So if we're talking about a PSYOP moving north, and there's going to be a pressure cooker situation possibly happening between people we know and our family members and things like that, we're going to have to be really centered, and we're going to have to be really strong and fierce within our heart space, because we can't overcome something if we've got wounding and we don't know it exists. If we know it exists, at least we know where we can be attacked through our own self-sabotage, through our own limiting belief systems. Because like, even though it's something that seems like it's attacking you, on some level, it's only showing you the kink in your own armor, and it's only showing you where you need to bring more light. And I'm not saying that means everything's rainbows and lollipops, that, like you just become this enlightened being that never feels anything. No, once you learn to live and overcome your past residual shadows that you've built up and you haven't been aware of for a long time, once you get up to date, I know it sounds weird saying up to date, but it's like when you get up to date, in the sense that once you've dealt with the backlog of residual trauma and you get to a point where you start to live your life where every day you assess what's coming up for you, and every day is a brand new altar to place the items. There's usually a couple of items left over from the day before. That's how I see each day. I see an altar, and I see there's usually one or two items juxtaposed to each other on this altar left over. And the next day I wake up, and even though it's clean, there's a couple of things sometimes that I have to bring through as a consciousness each day. And sometimes there's things that I take away and release that day. So when you think of your life as a continual unfoldment of your heart space altar, that objects are placed as metaphorical expressions of your own aspects of self. Okay, so because we've got, I've got the solar aspect of me, and then I've also got the lunar aspect of me, and then I've got the tree aspect of me with multitude of different trees, and I've got the color I've got all these different colors that I have that I can relate to. I'm all of those things, okay? And at any given moment or any given time, those aspects will come through, and if we're conscious enough and present enough, we can start to connect more deeply with those little messages that are coming from within and then being recognized externally. Because remember, we are living our experience, and our outer world is a reflection often of things that we are wanting to work with or change or transition on or develop or build mastery around. So it's getting really dark. Just 1 second. Hello. Hey Mr. Lily, how are you? I'm Charlie Robertson. Hello, Charlie. How you doing, girl? So it's that coming back to the shadow stuff. The dealing with your residual wounding is the key to everything that's happening externally. To helping decode more of that, you have to decode more of your own shadow material. And your shadow material is the ignorance within our own selves, in which maybe the conditions in which we've experienced or adapted to in repetition that have become so normal that we don't even think to question them, and they then end up becoming things that limit our consciousness without knowing. And also obviously, like, residual traumas, as in actual effects from things. You know, you don't have to go through the worst experience to have quite severe trauma. You can actually have, you know, just an experience with a friend who, you know, attacks you over something, a different belief system. Like what we're seeing a lot now is that, you know, where we don't know how to deal and have conversations about things that are so polarized, and it's almost like this kind of current age has taken us by surprise because we've been so adapted into technology and a certain reality that this new reality is starting to emerge. Not necessarily, I'm not saying it's the new normal in a good way or a bad way at this point in time. It's just a lot of change, and there's a lot of, you know, manipulation going on. So we've got to be super aware of our own wounding so we can identify where we can be utilized and weaponized. And I'm going to bring up the thing about weaponizing people. So, like I said earlier, when someone has wounding and they're really traumatized, even if they've deactivated, because they're like a live bomb, like trauma is literally like a live ticking bomb. It's there, your body purposely suppresses the experience as you go through it, because often it's so traumatizing that the body and the whole self has to protect the consciousness to some degree from some of those events or experiences, if it's a really, you know, if it's really traumatizing or earth-shattering experience that you've been through in more of a negative sense. But when you get to a point where you can initially, if you haven't got to that point, then you can be weaponized and you can be utilized, and you'll be a ticking bomb that is live and ready to go. So all it takes is what we're dealing with right now is AI technology. You know, I know that it seems like something in the future, right? But we're actually dealing with it now. I'm going to turn the light on one sec. Whoa, there you go. I'm not in the shadows no more. Let there be light. But parasitical consciousness. So I think I was talking about, what was I saying? Because I just got thrown. Hey, oh, Mr. Lily. That's good. I'm glad you're well, hun. Okay, so weaponizing people. So and this is also goes for in the sense of heavy metals in the system or heavy toxins in the body. This goes on all planes of experience, or like, sorry. All planes of knowing. So like if your body is really toxified and you've had a lot of exposure to heavy metals, and you know it starts to build like a sediment, you'll start to go through health problems, and it's like a slow but long-term ticking bomb. And if you don't release the debris and the density out of the body, or you don't deal with what that consciousness is, it will eventually, it's a cycle. You've started a cycle by having it in your body. Eventually it has to come full completion and bring out a narrative in which you have to experience to fully immerse yourself to learn the lesson. Because if you don't get the lesson, you have to experience the lesson. If you didn't understand it coming to you, then you've already brought it into your body and your physical crystallized experience, then it becomes a literal physical thing that is governed by karma, which I was talking about just like a bit earlier. So that weaponizing of people, if we don't do shadow work now in this time where there's so much polarization, then a lot of our polarization within us is going to cause us to be either pulled completely off center and pulled into narratives that are not of our making. And there's a phrase that I like to say, it's, if you're not using your will, somebody else surely will. And that's how powerful our will is. When we die, we leave a will so we can let people know what we are, what our last will is. Now, if you apply that understanding of your will in the sense of a spiritual or magical practice, your will be done. Like when you make a decision, even if it's a small one, that is your will. That is your free will in which you are making a clear and decisive choice for what you choose to bring into your reality, which I mentioned before, every day being a new like a sort of a clean altar with maybe a few objects from the day before, but it's an opportunity for you to create a new altar or a new theme, a new aspect within whatever other ongoing carrying themes that you're already existing within. Because I always see things in forms of containers. Like, you know, you might be someone who's a vet and you work in a vet, and then you also love diving, and then you also live on planet, like, you know, on, say, in Australia, and then you live in the world, and then you're a part of the universe. So there's all these, you know, different containers that hold different processes and outcomes depending on, it's just like astrology, how all these different things sort of create this juxtaposition, and everything's in unity but continuously experiencing many different perspectives. Okay, so when you've got wounding or weaponized, like your body is weaponizable, like someone can actually utilize you through triggering your trauma, through triggering your physical health into a negative state. That's actually that's what we're expected to be masterful at. It's not actually anyone else's job to de-weaponize us. Yes, you can get support, you can get help with, therapists and great healers and all that kind of stuff. But when you're actually thinking about your own vessel, your home, your physical experience, your first home for the spirit, the house for the spirit, it's our responsibility. Like, I know that because I've had to spend the last, 12 years heavily focusing on like detoxing my body, because just, my experience in this lifetime, I was exposed a lot to DDT as a kid, and I was exposed to vaccinations in a third world country, where they kind of gave them a little bit more intensely, or they gave them probably more, it was possibly even some of them live viruses. And that's not even a problem with, I'm not anti anything. I'm just saying those things, when they go into your body, and when there's the law of, karma, when something is initiated or physically initiated, there is a beginning, middle, and end, and there has to be a cycle that is formed as a result of that intention. So in regards to understanding how you can be weaponized, it's anything that has affected you negatively, has affected say even residual toxicity in the body. They're all our responsibilities, and that's part of the shadow work as well. Like, just because you don't know you have heavy metals, or just because you don't know you have a serious trauma that you haven't dealt with, doesn't mean that you should just pretend and continue going on. It really is a time to do a lot of deep healing, and that's something I've seen a lot in the lead up to this, but I can see it now with 2020, with the way people are polarized. I can just see that is the trauma. It's when someone has the empathy, but not the mental, like for example the empathy, which is the feeling, but not the mental mastery to go with it. Therefore they're half of a whole. They can't connect to the other aspect of who they are. And it's the same with narcissism. When you go to that full extreme level of narcissism, they can't actually connect to empathy. They can only do mental mastery. So they're two halves of the whole, and they shouldn't actually be two separate people. But then what happens often is that the polarization starts to create momentum, and then these people start to dance around each other. I'm not saying that, by the way, that the empath asks for the abuse or of any kind in any way, shape or form. It's just, I'm more talking more like unpersonal, but just more in the sense of magnetism and how it works. If we've got wounding, we tend to attract things that trigger that wounding up. And if we don't identify that it's our own wounding and it's not actually the other person, even though the other person might be being a dick, we then give our power over externally instead of actually healing the original wounding or the original pattern. So anyway, that's kind of the main thing, I guess. If anyone has any questions around weaponization of the body, I'm just checking if there's anything. Okay, cool. Yeah, so if anyone has any questions or anything about healing or self-healing or shadow work or anything like that, please go for it. I'll just have some water. I'll just be back in a sec. I'm going to get some water. I've got my awesome, it's like the spiral thing, it's called Duet. And when you turn it on, it actually causes the water to spiral up into like a toroidal field. And you put it on for like 9 minutes or 18 minutes, and it just sits, and it basically puts the water back into a perfect hexagon geometry, which is its most balanced and stable, I guess it's form, the most stable form that it comes in. And then I've got a tensor field here, and I've got a few around there, like these copper tensor fields, and then you pour like water through the tensor field, and tensor fields like neutralize everything. But we also have a water filter as well, but taking it to the extreme. 1 second. Hey, Nick Lane, how are you? I'm just 1 sec. Thanks for sharing, Tash. Thank you, beautiful Cassie. Hey, Apricot Whiskers. That's a cool name. I like that. I was talking about weaponization of the body or of the self in regards to our own trauma, and how we sort of go through life with this ability to suppress our traumatic experiences, but it's only meant to be a short-term thing. We're not meant to leave the trauma there and just continue living. And a lot of the time our society, like our Western culture, doesn't really cater to holistic healing. Everything's always really separated. I noticed when I studied a lot of stuff to do with Chinese medicine, they really do talk a lot about the relationship between two things. They don't just talk about labeling Crohn's as Crohn's and this is this, and everything has an individual name, and there's all these different fragments to the whole, which is part of the whole, and I understand that's a part of our perception at this time, the Western culture. But the Eastern culture is so interesting because it helps you understand that there are many ways or many bridges that can create an illness. Even if it's the same illness that 5 people have, they would have created it completely differently, each of them, because they have their own unique experiences or patchwork of journeying within that experience that has developed their own unique patterning and their own unique belief system and their own unique connection to whatever it is, so that they're doing in that lifetime. So yeah, healing trauma is, I think, everyone's number one goal right now. There's some really cool kinesiology I think points that you can, I think I'll find it and I'll post it, but it basically shows you how to do 5 points. I think it's like something to do with the kidneys, stomach, like back, I think maybe even covering eyes. There's a few different ones, and they help release residual trauma in the cells within the next 24 to 48 hours. It's pretty intense. Sometimes if you can feel something big's coming up and you do it, you'll actually get the full release. But there's just lots of ways that we can find to help get rid of this trauma, because if you have any levels of trauma, even if it's distorted belief systems or confusion about what your reality is based on childhood neglect or childhood any kind of experience that you've experienced that has affected you in a negative way because you've perceived it that way, or whether it's genuinely that way, it doesn't matter. It's still affecting you in the same way that anyone would experience trauma. So there's no like, people always say to me, well, I didn't go through what you went through, but I went through this. And I was like, everyone's gone through their own thing, and every trauma, there's no for me, there's no percentage of trauma. Trauma is trauma. You feel it, you don't feel good, it really affects you. It can make you short wire and make really rash decisions if you're not aware that you have trauma and you don't know that residual sort of like density exists inside the body, and so you don't realize what's actually causing the agenda or the drive towards, say, addiction, or say, really toxic relationships. You keep finding yourself in those, but you don't really know why. It's often trauma layered over time. Hey guys. And we need to start delayering a lot of that stuff, because that's what's the biggest problem right now that I'm witnessing, is the fear. And the fear can be addressed if we identify that the fear obviously is as a result of the mind control and the manipulation and the enforcement that's occurring right now, but also because there is residual fear within us and we haven't addressed it and haven't transmuted it, and we haven't fully overcome some of that wounding, or haven't identified the narratives that have built up within the wounding, that we don't know how to release it because we don't know it exists. So I think every single human has trauma. Like, you can't literally be on this planet without experiencing something traumatic on some level. And because the Western culture is so dominant in the way that they diagnose and the way that they operate, it's a certain school of thought, which there's many different ways of thinking of healing. There's not just one way. Not that they think that they really promote healing. I think they promote disease management. I don't think they promote healing. I think healing is a completely different thing. It's a self-awareness thing. I think healing comes from when you understand that you are a self-healing alchemy based, body temple. You have this body that exists right here, right now, continuously, and you're anchoring the below and the above aspects continuously through that. It's really hard to stay balanced as a human being at times because of that, because we getting so much information from above, or there's certain areas in our chakra system that have been affected or limited as a result of trauma in the body, or within our energetic field. So when someone has trauma and they've been genuinely they've got that trauma and it hasn't been deactivated. And I say deactivated because they're like a ticking time bomb. We've all got areas in ourselves. Some are just really, really mild, and some people's temperaments just deal with trauma differently. But there's a level of ticking time bomb. If you have trauma and it hasn't been resolved, there is a ticking time bomb within you that all it takes is the outward narrative to trigger you into it, and you can actually unconsciously go straight into a program or a pattern. And that's what a lot of this psychic attack is about. It's really is confusing people and distorting the information. And if you're not centered within your own truth, within your own like I am presence, higher self, whatever the fuck you want to call it, then you're going to find yourself being influenced by this misdirected chaos energy, which is being intentionally, algorithmed, because now we're living in an AI reality. It's not something of the future. It's already happening. The smart grids are up. We do have AI technology evolving within its own self alongside human consciousness. That is already happening now. If you're not thinking your thoughts and you're not thinking for yourself, then you can easily be falling into the programs that are AI based on just what we're experiencing as a consciousness through AI technology interacting and weaving through our reality. So we've got to be really aware that trauma can also be engaged from an AI point of view, and it can mean that we start manifesting or engaging in realities on an AI level, even as well as a nature-based level, from that trauma. And that's why you want to try to get to clear and to be really present with the body as much as to do a lot of detoxing, mental, emotional, physical, spiritual. I know the last 8 years have just been like that for me. It's just been a slog out commitment to fully healing my body, because I nearly died 8 years ago with Crohn's, and I was in a bad way. I experienced a lot of tyranny at the hospital that I went to. I'll tell that in another story, but that was a really traumatic experience, and I had to recover from that, and I didn't have the support of the medical system in the same sense, because it was so tyrannical. They didn't want to share information. They didn't want to work with me because it was my body. They wanted me to listen to instructions and only do what they told me to do. And that just doesn't work when it's your own sovereign body. Like, you need to make choices that you feel comfortable in. You can't be forced into decisions, and that being forced into decisions can result because of trauma. If you feel if you have trauma, like I can speak from personal experience when I've had PTSD, and if something happens, you're more easily controllable. You can at times have so much trauma that you can actually submit your power over without fully even knowing, because you're shutting down. And so that's also like the only way that we can protect ourselves in this time, with all of these different influence, the AI influence, we've got this satanic influence, we've got this mind control, we've got these, corruption happening, angry people on the streets, a lot of trauma being triggered in people, but they don't have the tools to deal with it. And with all of these different layers, we need to learn how to be the masters. We need to learn how to be totally centered, totally present, totally able to transmute at any given moment. I'm not there all the time at all. I'm like, sometimes can move through things really fast, and other times I can just feel like I'm, struggling to even like comprehend what it is that is affecting me. So we're all human in this, and we all have that wounding and things that hold us back from our own true leadership of, our own sovereignty. But I guess the whole point of this video, this like live chat, I just realized how much I'm seeing fear. I'm seeing a lot of misunderstanding around healing. People think that disease management and healing are the same thing, and they're just not. They're different, and that's fine. I don't at all judge anyone who wants to manage their disease with medication. That's totally fine. Sometimes I totally understand that there are times in life where you need to manage something until you're in a place where you're ready to deal with it. But I'm not okay with making them seem like they're the same thing. They're not the same thing. Self-healing alchemy is a sovereign choice. It does take huge amounts of commitment, but it's living your life as a living human being. It's not allowing anyone else to influence your own choices. It's, even if they are influenced, it's your ability to critically think and analyze where you can grow and develop more within yourself. It's not giving your power over to an outside force and just hoping that they're going to lead us in the right way. Like, you actually have to take the risk and be totally sovereign. You have to live your own truth in your own way. And I think that was probably one of the hardest hardest, like biggest lessons in my life going through illness processes, like having Crohn's and being in hospital, nearly dying, losing 30 kilos, going through so much, and everyone around me were telling me what I should do, how I should do it. I was being fear guilted into, certain ways of apparently healing, but to me, I only saw them as like disease management. I was like, that isn't the solution for me. Other people can choose that, but that just didn't feel right for me. I wanted to get to the crux of the illness. I didn't want to just live with the illness or symptoms and maybe they get a bit better, but I still have it. I want to understand what is this message? Crohn's has been a message for me. What is that? So when you understand where you have trauma or where you have physical illness or where you have manifested patterns of behaviors or patterns of the body, patterns of emotions or patterns of spiritual, whatever, like however you want to see it, they're just words. But if you really connect with all those different layers of who you are as a person and be totally honest about what it is that you feel holds you back, or what it is that you feel in shadow you keep manifesting, or what it is that you are sort of doing to sabotage your own leadership or your own sovereignty. Really ask those questions. Sovereignty is your biggest and your biggest purpose for being here. It is literally why you're here. Divine sovereignty is your birthright. It is your earthright. It is everything that you deserve to be. Like literally, it is the crown chakra, which holds the crown of your illuminated self as a sort of a lighthouse to the world to remember their own Christ consciousness as you do yourself, as you do through your own experience walking the path within Christ's awareness, which is the light. Let there be light. But yeah, so I guess when I'm talking about trauma, I'm talking about ignorance, I'm talking about darkness. And when I talk about healing, I'm talking about light, I'm talking about transcendence. And they're just simple understandings. And when we talk about, say, disease management, that's a mentally derived process which helps someone maybe get to, that's maybe a healing process in someone, in themselves, is to be able to have a break, to be able to wait till they're ready for something, or to have the management or support till they get to a point where they're physically strong enough to be able to take a clear action. So I get that they all have their place, and there is a level of healing within that maintenance, but as long as you understand that it's maintenance and you understand that is why you're using it, and it helps you get through to the next stage where you can continue to evolve. You don't want to get on a platform and think that platform is where you're meant to stay on your whole lifetime. That's just not a place that will help you transcend the shadow / wounding within your own aspects of self. I'll just have a quick look. Oh, hey guys. EBC, sorry. EBC Bree. Hey EBC Bree. And yeah, cool. Oh, hey darling. Hold up. It's hard to see. It's a bit dark in this room. Sorry. So yeah, that's pretty much what I wanted to chat about. If anyone has any questions about healing, about what they could focus on right now, or if there's any affirmations that people want to hear, I've been working a lot with affirmations over the last eight years especially, and I'm feeling really clear that I need to speak some of them for people to remember who they are through the sound of the voice. And we are an instrument of God. The human aspect of ourselves is literally the part of ourselves that needs to surrender. The God to the God consciousness, which comes through as the will of God, which is our will, which I talked about earlier. It's our God-given free will, and if we allow that to be that freedom, that expression of our soul to be taken away from us through compliance or through complacency or through our own wounding not being healed, therefore we can't decode reality in a holistic fashion, then we're in serious trouble. And I mean, I'm not just saying that on a global sense, but I'm saying that in Australia, but I'm also saying it on a personal level. Like, we're in a very powerful time, and especially moving into Lionsgate. That's like the Lionsgate portal over the next the energy is already opening up, and it's quite intense. I'm finding it pretty difficult at the moment. Just checking. Does anyone have any questions at all about healing before I might close it off soon? I've got the cat and the dog heckling me for dinner, so I better get going soon. Just check in. No. Honestly, thank you so much. I've done one live before this. I think I'm going to start doing a lot more. I really appreciate the love and the support. And thank you so much for listening to me talk about healing and being weaponized if you've got trauma. I'm a wacky lass. But yeah, I'll stay a little bit longer if anyone has any questions at all. Got Goose back here. Okay, no one's talking. I'm sending so much love to you guys. I don't care about your views. If you have views that are opposing to anything that I've said, I don't care. You know, we can still love each other. We don't have to agree on everything. But all I know is from my own personal experience, wounding needs to be healed if we're going to be able to stay centered in a dark and very, very influential time. There's a lot of mind control. There's a lot of different agendas happening. The more that we know our own truth and stay in alignment with that truth, the more that we, you know, step into working with elemental like fire, earth, air, water more consciously. When you're sitting under a tree, be aware, connect. Don't just shut yourself off and be on your phone. Actually start to make conscious choices around nature, because that will help you make better choices ultimately anyway, because you'll be coming from a more united and holistic place within yourself. Oh, weapon. Thanks, Cassie. All right, guys. Love you lots. Thank you so much. I don't know how to end it. Yep.